Welcome to the All In Leadership Podcast. I'm David Gadberry. This podcast is for leaders who want to grow in clarity, character, and courage. Whether you lead in business, ministry, your home, or your community, leadership is not about position, it's about responsibility and influence. Each week, we talk about practical leadership principles, real-world execution, and the inner work required to lead well and finish strong. If you're serious about becoming a better leader, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Hey, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us for the All In Leadership podcast. I am David Gadberry, the owner of All In Leadership Coaching and Consulting. I'm an executive coach, executive leadership coach with leadership roles in a lot of different organizations. And I just thought, since I live and breathe leadership and I'm always listening and learning and reading and studying, I've learned a lot over the years. I've experienced a lot over the years. And I thought, man, I want to share this with people. And also I want to grow in myself. And so this is our first podcast for All In Leadership, and we're going to be developing it as we go. There's going to be some short teachings and discussions, and then we're also going to bring on some leadership guests that will help you in areas that you are specifically dealing with in your leadership. And so thanks for joining in this leadership community, and I hope that this helps you. And if it does help you, please like and share and do all those things. Subscribe to our channel, because we want to build this leadership community as much as we can, because we want to be a help as much as we can. So today I want to talk to you about something that I think is very interesting. It's something that we all need to consider, and that is that leadership is not just a thing we do. It's not just a career. It's not just an industry. It's so much more than that. And I think it lands more in the role of responsibility. And because it does, it's more of an ambition. It's more than an ambition. It's more than a desire to be in charge, but it's a mindset of responsibility, a calling, even you might say a burden, if you will, because you feel this need to lead others, which means to empower them, to help release their potential, to help them become better. That's what true leadership is. It isn't making yourself better, it's becoming better so that you can help others become better. And so today I just want to talk about the idea of how calling clarifies our leadership focus. You know, without calling, what we find ourselves doing is just chasing trends. We find ourselves just finding what other people are doing, what a pattern may be out there, and jumping on the bandwagon and trying to make it happen. But if you ever really pay attention, really great leaders that have breakout kind of success, they do something different. They usually almost always go away from the crowd. They do something that's unique, something that's innovative, something that no one else is thinking of doing. It's so funny to watch, because you'll see a trend moving in a certain direction, and all of a sudden someone stands out because they cut from that trend and they move in a different direction and have breakout success. And the reason is because they weren't just following trends. They have a sense of calling, a sense of ownership to something greater than self. Without calling, you compare constantly. You get caught up in the comparison trap, because when you feel a calling on your life to lead in a certain way, what happens is you get pointed in that direction, and you start moving towards that thing that you believe you are supposed to be doing, that purpose for your life. And you don't have time to sit around and say, well, how are they doing? And what are they doing? And I wish we were more like them. And man, they should be more like us. That doesn't happen, because you're not focusing on what others are doing. You're focusing on what your responsibility is. Another thing is, without calling, you can burn out. Listen, when you feel a calling and you operate and function with a mindset that says, I am purposed to do this, what happens is it gives meaning to your life. I believe with all my heart that burnout is not a result of hard work or too much work. I believe burnout is hard work, too much work in the wrong direction. I believe that burnout comes because we're not doing the thing that brings the most fulfillment to us that uses the gifts and strengths in us, but we're just doing work trying to become successful, and it doesn't have the meaning that it should because it's not really the purpose for our life. So let's talk about it this way. First, calling versus career. You know, career equals income, and there's nothing wrong with income. We all want to make a good income, right? We want to make sure that we make a good income for ourselves, for our families, for our future, and for our family's future. And there is nothing wrong with that. Now, there's something wrong with greed and avarice and chasing things for things' sake. That can get you messed up and make your heart cold and you not be successful, but just be selfish. Your life will never be significant. It may be successful on some level, but it's not what really, truly is best. But there's nothing wrong with making a good income, and there's nothing wrong with trying to provide for your family and for others and providing jobs for people. It's all good stuff. But the difference between career and calling is calling you don't think so much about income or what's coming in, you think about contribution. In other words, what are we sending out? What are we accomplishing? Who are we touching? How are we giving? What is making a difference? Those are the difference in mindsets. You can have both, but I will tell you this, if career leads, you seem to drift away from meaning and drift into what everybody else is in. So you might ask, what problem are you burdened to solve? You could ask, who do I feel responsible for? What injustice frustrates me? You know, I remember one time, I never really wanted to do missions. I'm also a pastor and lead a really great church in Kingfisher, Oklahoma called Lifeway Church. And but years ago, I was pastoring in another church, leading an organization there, and I felt this need to go into missions work. And I'd never wanted to because, to be honest, when I experienced it as a kid, my dad was also a pastor and I lived in a preacher's home. When I experienced it as a kid, it was always so weird when we have missionaries come. Nothing against them, but they were super boring and they were different than everybody. And as a kid, it just seemed so, I would never want to do that. I don't know why it hit me that way, but it just did. So even when I went into ministry and I did all kinds of different ministry, outreach and pastoral and worship ministry and all of it. I've done every kind of ministry you can think of in almost 40 years. But I never wanted to do that. But about 20 years ago, man, the Lord just began to deal with me to do this, and I couldn't shake it. And so I started training for it and had some mentors to teach me how to do it. And turns out I was just a natural at doing it. But one of the things that indicated to me that I needed to do it is because I became very burdened by injustice that I saw going on in the world, in poverty. I mean, so much impoverishment, so much. Like, we don't understand it in the Western world, but when you go into the third world, the developing world, you can see things that you're like, I didn't even know this existed. And when I see kids in that scenario, or human trafficking is really one that moved me to action. And now over the years, we've done so much ministry globally, but the reason I felt that movement to go was because I started feeling burdened. I started feeling I need to solve this problem. I didn't know what I could do. I didn't know how I would make an impact, but I realized that if I would consistently do it over time, I could make a large impact, and I have. And I will continue to do so with many, many other people who've given and gone and been a part. So I've made lots of great partnerships and friendships all over the world now as a result of it. And it's all because I started feeling like, what problem am I burdened to solve? Who do I feel responsible for? What injustice frustrates me? That's calling language. If you want to know what calling sounds like, when you start having those kind of thoughts, you're sensing a call. That's a responsibility. And let me tell you something, don't shrug that off. So here's 3 tests of calling I can give you as a leader. If you want to know what the tests of calling are, the first is the burden test. In other words, it won't leave you alone. Like something gets on your, and you know what, let me tell you something else too. It doesn't have to be like outreach or things like that. It could be a business idea. There could be something God is saying that He wants to innovate in the earth and He wants to use you to do it. It could be something that it ultimately is going to have a big kingdom impact. You may not see it now, but you'll see it later. But what is it He's stirring you up to do? What is it that won't leave you alone. The second test, calling test is this: the sacrifice test. You're willing to pay for it. In other words, you're willing to do it. You're willing to go for it. You're willing to go all in. It's what I call all in. Living that, that's why we're called all in leadership, coaching, and consulting, because we believe that we don't live life on the fringes. We believe it's not a good, healthy thing to live life on the sidelines. We don't think it's a good, healthy thing to live halfway in, or kind of a lukewarm type thinking where I'm maybe, but maybe not. No, if it's worth doing, step into it with both feet, jump in with your whole self, dive in, go underwater. Don't hold back anything. That's the way you should live. That's called the sacrifice test. And it means you're willing to pay for it. And that's what, when people have asked me before to invest in their company or their business, my first question always is, what have you invested? Now, it may not be a lot of money, but it may be a lot of work. And I'm willing to look at things that way for that, if that's the truth. Because here's the deal, if we're really called to it, we're willing to sacrifice for it. So that's the second step in the test of the call. The third thing is the longevity test. It doesn't disappear when applause disappears. So sometimes when you decide, I'm going to do something, people get really excited about it. But after a while, it just becomes work. And you just have to keep working at it and have to face the problems, solve the problems, go through the issues, deal with the stuff. And then the applause is gone. Everybody else is not as excited about it as you are. And sometimes it feels like you're on an island trying to make this happen. And the truth is, when it won't leave you and you keep doing it, even though no one's cheering anymore, it's a call. That's a call. And you need to prepare yourself for it. And if you have a real responsibility for whatever that is, I'm telling you, you'll do it no matter what. So here's what we need to realize, that calling brings clarity in our life. That's what we started talking about today. Clarity reduces anxiety. I believe with all of my heart that one of the reasons that we're so anxious and stressed in our culture today is because we're not living for meaning. We're not living for purpose. We're not living for call. But when we get clear about what we're responsible for, what is we were created for, if you want to say it that way, man, it reduces anxiety. It brings it down. When leaders don't know their calling, they overcommit to things that they shouldn't be doing because they're trying to stay busy doing things, because it seems successful people are busy people, so I must be doing this and doing that and we overcommit to things that we shouldn't be committed to because it's not really our lane. When leaders don't know their calling, they overreact. We overreact. Because what we're doing, we don't necessarily believe in like we would believe our calling, so we get insecure and we overreact to problems and issues and solutions because it's not our lane. When leaders don't know their calling, they overcompare. Again, we get caught in that comparison trap. Calling simplifies decisions. Does this align with what I'm responsible for? Now think about that. Think about the decisions that you've made recently or the decisions that you're walking through. Think about that question. Does this decision that I'm about to make align with what I'm truly at the core responsible for? And if it doesn't, no. The answer is no. If it does, the answer is a resounding yes. And that's clarity. And that's what we need in our lives. Practical leadership is very important, that we don't just talk about these ideas in an ethereal way, but that we bring them down to the surface. We let the rubber meet the road, if you will. And so here's what I would ask you to do. I want you to do this. I want you to write this sentence. I believe I am responsible before God to blank. So if you're not a believer and you're not a Christian and you're checking out this podcast, you just need to understand that I am a believer. I believe in God and I am a follower of Jesus Christ, and I believe that Jesus is the only way to the Father, because He Himself declared that. So I want you to know that. If you're not a believer, these principles can still work for you because God even though you may not believe in him, created you with certain gifts and talents and skills and abilities. And so you might write this sentence and say, I believe I am responsible to blank. That sentence filters everything. I say it this way, I believe I am responsible before God to this. And you have to go through some processes to figure out what you believe, and we'll talk more about that later, but what you believe you're responsible for. But some indicators could be, what are your gifts and strengths? What do you naturally bend towards? What do people get excited about you doing or you saying? What do people gather around you to do? What are you willing to sacrifice for? Just the things we talked about today. So I want to encourage you to get clear on that and start looking at your life not so much as just a career, but if you're truly a leader, you need to think of it as a calling, because you're responsible, if nothing else, for the people who are following your leadership. So thanks so much for joining us today. And just remember that leadership without calling becomes performance, but leadership with calling is true stewardship, because it's you stewarding what you've been given, what you've gained, what you've earned for not just you, but for generations to follow. So thanks for being a part of the Leadership Podcast today. And I just want to say, if this helps you, if it's helping you practically, if it's helping you think, if it's helping you process, hey, share it with somebody else. Like it, subscribe to it, hit that little bell. Let us know that this is helping you. And make comments if you will, or ask questions. And we'll put some notes in the notes section here on the channel. And we'd love to see you again. God bless. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to the All In Leadership Podcast. If today's episode added value, share it with another leader. And if you're interested in coaching or leadership development through All In Leadership, you can learn more in the show notes. Remember, leadership is a decision. Lead with clarity, lead with courage, and stay all in. See you next week.